I was feeling unsettled this afternoon as I thought about these high holy days and what we have prepared to share with you in form of our sermons. And I was trying to figure out why I was so unsettled, and I think it's because we feel so many emotions, so much pain and complexity, and we think a lot about what you need to hear, and we try and give it to you if we can. But I think in some ways this summer, more than any summer in my rabbinate, we've wrestled with whether we can say everything that you need to hear. So I'm going to say in advance that we've written the sermons that we need to hear this year. And we're hoping they're the sermons that you need to hear too. I don't know about you, but I'm really good at doom scrolling. I'm good at trolling through social media and finding all the ways in which the world is imploding. I see all the bad news, and it's almost like an addiction. It's also really bad for me. Bad for my mental health, bad for me wanting to get out of bed sometimes. I know there are a lot of difficult things going on in the world for the Jewish people and for humanity in general. I'm not naive or Pollyannish. I know that I need to know what's going on out there so I can try to make sense of it myself, so I can try to figure out what we can and should do to try to make things just a little better. But every once in a while, I try to do what I've heard called glee-freshing. I don't know if that's a thing. My kids will tell me later on they're telling me now it's not a thing. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I go looking for things that bring me joy, even in this really challenging time. A few weeks ago, my friend and colleague, Rabbi Evan Schultz, posted this on Facebook. I recently took a DNA test. It revealed that I am 80% memory and 20% hope. 80% memory and 20% hope. And I thought that was just so beautiful. We Jews are all about memory and hope. More on that tomorrow from Rabbi Rubin. And as he often does with his stunning poetry, Rabbi Schultz made me wonder, if I were to say what I was made of, what ingredients and in what ratio, what would I say? What combination of elements make up who I am, at least today? And to what extent have I strayed away from who I am on a DNA level? And since it is Rosh Hashanah and the spiritual gates are open and Judaism provides for us the chance to return to who we are at our best, what is one thing I know I could do better in my life that I might focus on in these days? Of course, this is not a precise exercise. We are complex creatures, and we don't always add up neatly and precisely to 100%. For example, I'd say that I am 100% a father, 100% a partner, 100% a Jew, 100% a Zionist, and 100% a White Sox fan, God help me. That's way more than, 100%. I know Rabbi Schultz. He too, in his fullness, is about other things in addition to memory and hope. But if I were writing a poem like the one he wrote, what would I say? I know I won't say it as well as he would. I might say that in addition to all the other things that I am 100% of, I am 25% joyful optimist, 19% this too shall pass, 18% German stubbornness, ask my wife, 16% Carole King lyrics, 10% naivete, 7% bad dad jokes, and 5% where did I leave my phone? What would you say? What are the essential elements that make you you. Think about it for a minute. Now, unlike other moments in life, there's no test, there's no right or wrong answer here, and no need to be like anyone else in this room. Each of us is made up of a different ratio of positivity and anxiety and jazz and punk and rock and roll, menschiness and contradiction. But take a moment to think. If you had to say what was essential to your character, what would those things be? If you were writing up the elements of your own sacred story, the mix of things that make you uniquely you, what would those elements be? Because this is the season of reflection. We get this chance to think about who we are and who we want to be. We've been given this opportunity to celebrate the better angels of our nature and to notice the gaps between who we currently are and who we aspire to be. Judaism offers us this opportunity to change if we want to, if we commit to making a change. But first must come reflection, transparency with ourselves, honesty that might hurt a little. So take a moment. Think about the ingredients that make you who you are. I'm going to invite you to take a risk for a moment. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you, whether that's a friend, a family member, or a person you just met when you sat down, and take a moment to share with them a few of the magic ingredients that add up to make the joyous, complicated person that you are. Rabbi Schultz is 80% memory and 20% hope. I'm 18% German stubbornness. Who are you? Take a minute, I'm really asking. Turn to someone next to you and share a word or two about the ingredients that you think make up you. So I need an answer or two from people who would be willing to share, if you're willing to. If it's a secret and you're only telling your partner, that's okay. Give me an ingredient that makes up you. Can I share what you said? Robert said he's 95% grandparent. Okay, what else? Anything else that you would say? What? I need a couple answers. Yes?
I'm 60% grateful.
60% grateful. Fantastic. Great. Anything else also up there? If you got an answer, just shout it out. Yes, please. 80% nudnik. Your children are sitting behind you. I won't ask them if they agree. 100% nudnik. Even better. Okay. Fantastic. Any other answers that you want to give me? I need another answer or two. You got an answer for me? Yes. 30% anxiety. Yeah, I think a lot of us are. Carol, yes. 10% Broadway. Yes.
Some very high unspecified percentage up.
Some high percentage optimist. Yes, Rosalie. 75% crazy energy. I love all these answers. I hope you'll keep thinking about them and you can share them with other people too. Now, for just a moment, I want you to think about the combination of factors that helped make you who you are. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to share this with your neighbor unless you choose to share later on. Think for a moment. We're Jews, so we need 4 questions. Here's your 4 questions to think about. Number 1, who have been the teachers and mentors who raised you and taught you and helped form you? Number 2, what are the joyful moments in your life that help shape who you are? Number 3, What are the losses and even traumas that gave you those hard-earned scars on your soul? And number 4, how much of your story do you feel like you've written yourself? And how much has been written for you by the people in your life and by your life's experiences? Just take a moment. This is an exercise for each of us to do on our own. Someone's calling in with their answer. That's good. If you have your own answer to number 1 about the teachers and mentors that you've had, take a moment now to silently thank them for helping you write chapters in the sacred story that is your life. Maybe you can take a deep breath of appreciation. Now something a little bit harder. If you can, take a moment to see if you can let go of some of the anger or resentment toward people who wrote chapters in your life that you wish you could cut out of your story, even though you know you can't. As you strive to release the grip that anger and resentment has had on your soul, take a deep breath in and try and let it go a little bit. Now take a moment to think about the opportunity in front of you, in front of all of us, to make a change in our lives, a small one or a big one, in these next 10 days. Let's take a deep breath together for the work in front of us. Are there new ingredients you want to add this year to the mysterious potion that is you? Are there ratios you'd like to play with in your life in 57-85? A little more of this, a little less of that. Are there people who you need more of or less of in your sacred story in the coming year? There is so much opportunity for individual growth in these days, and also I know so much work is required to lean into that opportunity. I know we can't control everything or everyone. I know there are choices we can make about how our lives unfold and other events and people that write parts of our stories for us. And what's also true and important to remember, I believe, is that we each retain the rights to our own sacred stories. And that despite the fact that we don't write every word in our own narratives, we must remember that we are certainly in the writer's room. We are the ultimate editors. We have a huge impact on, a tremendous amount of agency in how our own stories unfold and how they're ultimately told by others. As I contemplated what I might say to you this evening on the eve of this new year, I thought of the documentary hypothesis. There are 2 essential schools of thought about who wrote the Torah. In the traditional understanding, God wrote the Torah wholesale, or perhaps God whispered into Moses' ear exactly what to write. In either case, this school of thought has the Torah written by one authority, all at once, so that if there appears to be any contradictions or mistakes or conflicting messages, that's an us problem as readers of the Torah. If God is the author, there can't possibly be any contradictions or typos or inconsistencies in the book. In this school of thought, with God as the sole author, we are to understand that, of course, God wouldn't write an imperfect book, so it's on us to dig deeper to see the unchallengeable truths within. Another school of thought is called the documentary hypothesis, which posits that the Torah was written by different authors, at least 4 in total: the J author, the E author, the P author, and the D author. The documentary hypothesis says, if there appears to be some bumpy places in the Torah, different versions of the same story, characters acting out of character, even words that appear to be misspellings, it's because there were several authors writing the story over hundreds of years. Now, there is so much to say about the two schools of thoughts and all of the gradations and variations and contradictions of each one. That's for a different night. And if you're interested, I'd be glad to engage with you about each theory, the pros and cons of each. But for now, I'll just say that I'm a fan of the latter. I believe that the Torah was written by different people, probably way more than 4, who each had their own sacred story, their own interaction with holiness, and their own understanding of why we're here on earth and what we're meant to be doing while we are. And then someone came along and wove them all together, sometimes seamlessly, sometimes in ragged ways where we can see the breaks that can help explain seeming contradictions and inconsistencies in the text. And for me, those imperfections and inconsistencies result in a book called the Torah that I can actually relate to, because I too am imperfect and inconsistent. And my belief in this theory no doubt shapes how I see my own life, shapes how I see human lives in general. I believe that each of our own personal stories have multiple authors. There are many chapters we write ourselves and other chapters that, after a fashion, write us. And leaning into this hypothesis is so helpful and hopeful to me during these days of repentance and return. It helps me know and accept that there are things about me that I have decided to be, and people and factors that formed me, perhaps without me even knowing it. It helps me understand why some things I don't like about myself are easier to change than others. And above all, this theory helps me understand that ultimately I am the editor of all of these disparate stories, the convener of all these authors, imperfect as I am, as I know each of us is. It helps me appreciate that the story of my life that I am editing and compiling is sacred, like the Torah, with all its nuances and messiness. But unlike the Torah, if this theory is right, it means that my story is still being written. It means I can change if I want to. It means that each of us can write new and different chapters to a certain extent. We can choose which stories will define us, which stories we will feed, and which ones we won't. Which stories will be our North Star when we feel lost, and which stories we will choose to notice without letting them strangle us or our progress in life. And that is my hope for each of us in this season. May we each come to understand something a little more deeply about ourselves and why we each have been the way we have been up until now. And may we each resolve with that knowledge to make changes we know that we can make as the credited authors of our own sacred narratives. To close, I'll share a poem I wrote recently entitled, "My Life is a Documentary Hypothesis." I like to think that I'm spinning my own story, and to some degree I am. I did write the story of my breakfast. I determined that I'd have oatmeal with brown sugar, but no raisins today. I wrote the story of my clothes today, too. I chose to wear the gray slacks instead of the blue. In many ways, I am the spinner of this yarn, but in many ways, my story is spinning me. You see, I'm just the J author. The king and the queen and the mighty warrior in Rabbi Nachman's tale also spun threads in my story. And surely the master of prayer wrote a piyut or two into my journey. And right along with them, the drunkard, the Frenchman, the beautiful woman, they added the zest and the surprise and the phantasm to my chronicle. Closer to home, the Red of Eschau, born in 1640, the first person I can trace on my family tree. He wrote the epigraph, although to my mom's dismay, he forgot to weave his red hair into my luscious locks. And my parents, Bonnie and Lester, they wrote the author bio. They're still writing it as I dig the same wells they dug. And the e-author is my wife, Alyssa, the benevolent goddess of copy editing, without whom there is no story worth telling. And my children, Ari and Lilith, they wrote the chapters on patience, on pizza, on blessing, on love, and on so many bad dad jokes. And there's the R author, Rabbis Wilco and Dreyfus and Wolf and Bob and Schwartz and Berg and Chasen and Caruso and Limmer and so many other rabbis. Those rabbis sure can spin a yarn. If my sermons are too long, can I blame them? Then there's the O author. Osrui's summer camps thread is woven almost imperceptibly into every verse. Chicago wrote the foreword. Madison and London and Jerusalem and Cincinnati wrote the praises on the back cover. Atlanta wrote a chapter. Mahwah, New Jersey wrote a few. New York City was a twist in the tale. It snuck up on me. It's still unfolding in wild and wonderful ways. And then there's the sun's story, burned into my skin the first time I hiked in the Negev. And there's the moon, too. Perhaps my love of all things space is no coincidence, as apparently I was conceived in the days before Neil Armstrong took one small step, and I was born in the days just after Apollo 13 had a problem. And there's a grassy field filled with yellow flowers after a long winter rain in Simi Valley, California. That chapter was submitted to the editor just yesterday. I like to think that I'm spinning my own story. After all, I thought that acknowledging all of these authors and so many more might leave me feeling sad, disappointed, frustrated, that I wouldn't be able to claim the Pulitzer all by myself. Feeling as I once felt like the mystery was gone when I first learned that the Torah itself was also surely written into aliveness this way, with many voices woven into a tapestry. But then I realized, as I realize now, that the fact that so many authors could come together to write something so miraculous was an even greater tale than I ever could have spun myself. The legend is still unfolding. The writer's table is cacophonous. Everyone has something to say. Who is this aliveness I am? My life is a documentary hypothesis, and so is yours. Shana Tova.